Grace and peace to all of you that are joining us tonight. Grace upon grace, peace that passes understanding. Welcome to the live stream here tonight while we are swimming in the stream of love and happiness and joy of everything that is God. And we're hoping that you feel the same way, hoping that you feel that connection to the Most High, that you feel where you are in God, that you're right inside of God, and that God is living in you, hoping that that's how you feel tonight. So I'm here, little Brent, joined by the Hawk, my bro, my friend, my brother-in-law, brother in love. So, and he's quite a preacher. I don't know if you got to listen to this past Sunday, but preached an outstanding sermon that loved, and then followed up by exactly what you would expect to happen when he preaches, is that God moves in a certain way, which we talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Talk about how, for one, I could at least say this part about how one thing that sort of led off with as he began to close on Sunday, and as we began to have this moment in the Spirit, where God began to move in a very certain way for folks as we prayed in the altar and sang songs, and then something that Michael had mentioned, or that you had mentioned, out of Acts 2, where they were in one mind and one accord, and how it gives this idea of, again, the contemplative practice of everybody saying the same thing and speaking the same thing, very much so how we do in church today, which is a good practice of having a worship song that everybody unites around. And as everybody begins to sing in chorus and in unison together, how breaths begin to match up, heartbeats begin to align, how everybody seems to get into this unitive, not just unitive consciousness, but a unitive flow where everybody is not just singing the same words, but we're having the same feeling, having the same experience as everyone else. And then you took us to this part out of Acts chapter 3 where he's preaching, and it says that times of refreshing and times of restitution will come from the Father, and how the word means a recovery of breath, or to breathe again. And it's encouraging everybody. At least that's what Sunday became as it got to the end there, and how it would be for any of you that are listening, that it's the encouragement to get you to breathe again. The encouragement to get you to exhale any ideas of separation, breathe out any ideas that you are not included in the covenant of God, breathe out anything that would cause, as you talked about, as the carbon dioxide that stays within the lungs. It's poisonous, and it's not something that produces life. But exhaling it, you're not just breathing it out of your lungs, but you're exhaling any type of toxin that is in the bloodstream, as the hemoglobin carries oxygen-rich blood throughout the body, because the oxygen that you've taken in, and it's converted in the bronchioles and everywhere else that happens, and all of the anatomy. I'm not a doctor, obviously, and that's all the things that take place in the lungs as oxygen begins to diffuse across the membrane and get into your blood, and then all the other when your blood begins to carry out all of the deficiencies or the toxins, and you breathe that out along with the carbon dioxide. Asking folks and inviting everybody, and this is what you do such a great job at, and I love it when you get like this. But inviting everybody to exhale all of those bad ideas that make you think that you're not a part of God, and getting them to breathe again. Don't hold in these breaths. Don't hold in your death breath. Don't hold in this breath of saying that God has left me, or God's not for me, or anything like that, anything that's negative. Exhale all of those bad thoughts and breathe in the oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich breath that comes from God. That was beautiful.
It's, I titled the sermon Deep Breaths, Reconnecting to Reality, because John said that Jesus came in grace and truth. And the word truth means reality. Right? He came, and he is our reality. And I think that a lot of times we find ourselves disconnected because of, as you well stated, the bad ideas, the bad theologies, the poor preaching that we've heard over the years, or whatever the case may be, people preaching you into the dirt and criticizing you and everything, and talking about how horrible of a person you are and how wicked of a sinner you are, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And we create this separation. And the breathing, literal physical breathing, is in psychology what they call a grounding technique.
Yes.
And so, and we think about ground, what does it mean to be on the ground, right?
Yeah.
It means to be sitting here in this place, knowing where I am and what I'm doing, and so on and so forth. And it's like when you start to kind of float away in your anxiety or in your fear or whatever, you can use deep breaths to reconnect yourself to reality, to right now in this moment, and it actually calms the body, the physiology, right? And so, it's the same thing spiritually speaking, and at least in my mind, that you breathe in, the truth about who Christ is and what He's done for us and how we're represented to the Father. We're not represented as these filthy, dirty sinners or these horrible, terrible people that God needs to punish or do away with altogether, but we're actually represented as the children of God.
Yeah.
We literally are the children of God, and even Christ says that. I mean, you go Psalm 82, David says, "Ye are gods and children of the Most High." And Jesus, calls out the religious crowd in his day. Did God not say that you are gods, that you're children of the Most High, right? Yeah. But you're going to die as men because you're totally disconnecting yourself from your reality, from the reality of who you are.
That's right.
And so when it comes to this breathing, whether it's literal physical breathing and reconnecting ourselves to the moment, or it's the breathing in the right ideas about who we are in Christ, that's what reconnects us to reality. Yeah. And Christ is reality. He is the way.
He's it.
Yeah.
But everything about theology, Christology, is theology.
Yes.
Christology. Yes. Focusing on a Christ-centered theology. That is truly understanding Scripture.
Yep.
That it points to Him. It's about Him. He comes in the volume of the book. Search the Scriptures. You'll find that it's written of me.
Yep.
That's the thing that's going to save you. So everything comes back to that center of having Christ at the middle of everything. Yeah. And breathing out all of that and breathing in His reality.
Yeah. Yeah, because that stale air doesn't do anything for you. There are no, like you said, there's no nutrients. There's nothing good. It's not oxygen rich. It's not even necessarily carbon dioxide rich. It's stale air. There's literally nothing there, and it's not moving.
Right.
And so and it's important for us to access the deepest parts of our body, our physiology. And one way to do that is through that deep breathing. The number one marker for longevity among humans is lung capacity. And so it's interesting when you start learning about what's going on in your lungs. There's actually these tubes. You mentioned kind of the bronchioles. You have those tubes, but you have these other tubes that go deep down into your lungs, into the tissue. If you line them end to end, they would go from New York State all the way down to Key West, right? Just one person's, those tubes in their lungs, and the tubes that are deepest in your lungs are connected to the parasympathetic nervous system, which I talked a little bit about on Sunday. Yeah, the parasympathetic nervous system is part of the autonomic nervous system, right? So you have those two parts, the parasympathetic and sympathetic. But the parasympathetic is what calms you down. That's what chills you out, right? But in order to access those tubes that are in the lowest part of the lung, you need to be able to breathe deeply. And when you do breathe deeply, then you actually start to activate that system. And a long time ago, it was believed that was completely impossible. I'll read a little bit about that here in a second. But when it comes to breathing deeply and accessing those parts of the body or whatever, again, we activate that system that helps us calm down, that helps us heal, that helps us recover. And in my mind, when I think about our capacity for God, right, or our capacity for truth. I mentioned a minute ago before we started that. I think about that statement from Nietzsche that you are not just the truth that you currently know or hold, right, but you are all the truth that you could understand if or could be, right? If you would just tolerate it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same with God. That we have this great capacity to have more and more of the Spirit of God operating in our life, in whatever way that is. I don't want to get I'm not being weird about it.
Let's get weird.
What's the movement? If you just believe it and say it or whatever.
Oh, name it and claim it.
Yeah, name it, claim it. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not the operation I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Spirit of God really moving, changing you, helping you see you the way that God sees you, the way that you really truly are, accessing your purpose, accessing those traits that are inborn in you. We've talked about epigenetics before, turning on genes literally in your body, turning on things in your mind that maybe you've not been able to access before. That's what I mean when I say that we have this capacity for more of God or more of the Spirit of God. And I think that we have to sometimes with folks going to church and or just in religion whatsoever, or just in general, you find that they only want so much. They only want to take little sips of it, right? and the problem is it doesn't kill you, but it also doesn't make you super healthy, right? So it's like sipping on air. What we figured out is that if you breathe in little sips of air throughout the day or whatever, you're really not accessing fully your physiology. You're not accessing the capacity in your lungs to give you more energy, to give you more strength, to give you more stamina, and all those things. And so it's the same thing spiritually, right? It's I'll go check in on Sunday, or I'll go check in on Wednesday, or I'll read my daily devotion because it's checking the box or whatever. I'll read my one little scripture here and there. But it's not a real experience. It's not that life-changing type of experience.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I mean, and you talked about it, the contemplative prayer. I mean, well, we talked about it earlier today, but I think that contemplative prayer and those sitting moments, right? Like those are things that we need more so in the church, especially in the West. I think it happens a lot more in the Eastern, Orthodox churches.
I don't think we realized how close we were to that in the charismatic movements and the Pentecostal movements, especially in the worship movements, because we would have these moments where, and we called it back then. I'm not 50 years old, so I'm not I don't remember all of the things that it was called, but I remember enough at 36. I can remember being in those worship services, and I'm talking about practice the presence, and we would say that. We would talk about it, and we would get into these moments where it's like a flow. And you might not be singing words, might just be playing worship music, may have gotten to this point in a worship service where the song has led you collectively as you're singing, what we called corporate worship. You're singing corporately together in one unitive voice, or use that word. But I don't think we realized how close we actually were to in practicing the presence of being that, knocking on the door of contemplative prayer. And how we get, like you said, we get to this point where it's it's not enough. I got to do something else, or maybe I don't do this or don't do that. And it's like we get right at the edge of getting to this place where you don't have to speak and you don't need to speak. And I think sometimes when we have that and we feel the need to jump in, it's probably based out of so many different things, but more than likely it's there's got to be the word, there's got to be the logos. The logos has got to be spoken in some way. So it's this need for the word, but we equate that again right back to the text. We equate it to the text of the Bible instead of the logos or the logic that God is presenting in that moment. When you are contemplating and you begin to feel the Spirit move over you, And you went to this on Acts 2 on Sunday, how the Spirit of God sits on every one of them.
Yep.
And how it rests on every single one of them. And it's, again, we've said this many, or at least I've said it many times, it's reminiscent to Genesis 1 and 2, where it says that the Spirit hovers over all of the waters and begins to form something. So you connect Genesis 1 and 2 to Acts 2, where the Spirit of God has sat on all of them.
Yes.
And now the Spirit of God begins to move inside them, and now it's swirling over, and now there's this egg, there's this cosmic egg that is being formed, and something starts bursting out of it, and it's these tongues of fire that begin to sit on every one of them, and they start speaking in this language that they've never learned before, and they have this charismatic experience that is not really explained to any, not really explainable. And a lot of times we try to use our theology to have an answer for every single thing, when that's not what Jesus is really leading us to, not to have an answer for every single thing in life. And it leads you to this place. This is kind of unexplainable.
Yep.
And it's okay to leave it unexplainable. And it's okay to not fully grasp it with your finite mind, because it's out of your mind.
Yes.
And when you have these contemplative moments, or you practice the presence, or I think we have this a lot still. We pray, and you listen to a worship song that really speaks to you. It doesn't even have to be a worship song. It could be Caleb at the end of live streams. I started doing this because I started doing it sometimes when I write my sermons, or just when I just need to chill out at work. Listen to Lo-Fi Girl, and it's just this cool, calm beat that is just as smooth as it can be, and it takes you out of your mind of all of the swirling stuff. And again, kind of like the Spirit hovering over the waters of chaos, it takes you out of that. And or maybe it's just the Spirit hovers over all of that, because now you don't have so many words going on, jumbling up your thoughts, jumbling up your mind, and trying to get you to think this, think this, think this, and you're able to maybe even organize your thoughts a little bit better, or organize the chaos, and then you realize it's a work of the Spirit.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was going to say. It takes away all these words, right? You don't need all the words. You just have this flow or this rhythm that's kind of in the background, and it's like you tap into that and get synced with that.
It's being.
And it is.
It's being. And that's a word that you used on Sunday that I was captured by that. You used it out of, and I think it was Genesis 1:26, where it says that God breathed into the nostrils of Adam, and he became, the word became a living soul. The word became is hayah.
Yep.
And it's the same word that's used in Genesis 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, when God would say, let there be light.
Yes.
And how the word hayah is not just be as an existence, but to breathe.
That's right.
So then let breathe light, or let light breathe.
Yes.
Let light have its existence.
Yeah. And that again, going back to Sunday, the ancients connected breath to existence. If it didn't breathe, it didn't exist, right? And in order for a person to exist, in order for a life to exist, it has to breathe. Yeah. And it's connected to Yahweh. The I am.
That's good.
The I am, and I pointed that out on Sunday. But when he tells Moses, "I am that I am," I'm this breath.
Yes.
And I'm connected to this other breath.
Yes.
And it's the two breaths. And we're intertwining the two. That the word that, when he says I am that I am, the word in the Hebrew is asher. And it means it's this intertwining of two ropes, and it means to press together. And you literally it was kind of like braiding a piece of rope, right? And in what I pictured was literally the breath of God that is intertwining with our breath, just like it did with Adam in the beginning. When he breathed into Adam's nostrils and he became, like you said, he breathed into existence, right? Yeah. But he breathed into his nostrils, and it's these two breaths. It's God's breath and my breath being intertwined, being twisted up together. And that's what brings about that life, brings that surge of energy. And going back to the contemplative prayer from the book that I referenced on Sunday, and I sort of got into this at the very, very end, but I wanted to kind of touch base on this because this is very interesting. He says, a last word on slow breathing, it goes by another name, prayer. Mm-hmm. And he said, when Buddhist monks chant their most popular mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, Each spoken phrase lasts 6 seconds with 6 seconds to inhale before the chant starts again.
Mm-hmm.
The traditional chant of Om, the sacred sound of the universe. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but yeah. It's used in Jainism.
Too. Yeah, yep. It's one of the most oldest ideas in the world.
Exactly, yeah. And other traditions, it takes 6 seconds to sing with a pause of about 6 seconds to inhale. The Sata Na Ma chant, one of the best-known techniques in Kundalini Yoga, also takes 6 seconds to vocalize, followed by 6 seconds to inhale. Then there were the ancient Hindu hand and tongue poses called mudras. A technique called Kachari, intended to help boost physical and spiritual health and overcome disease, involves placing the tongue above the soft palate so that it's pointed toward the navel cavity. The deep, slow breaths taken during this Kachari each take 6 seconds.
Yeah.
So Japanese, African, Hawaiian, Native American, Buddhist, Taoist, and Muslim, these cultures and religions all had somehow developed the same prayer techniques, requiring the same breathing patterns, and they all likely benefited from the same calming effect. And then there was this group in Italy that did a study. And they went and they took 2 groups. It was a group of, they took one group. They prayed a Buddhist mantra and then the Ave Maria.
Yeah.
And on average, it was almost exactly 6 seconds for the first part of the prayer, and then 6 seconds to inhale, and then it worked out to 5.5 breaths per minute, or about 6 breaths per minute, right? So, and he says, even more stunning was what breathing like this did to the subjects. Whenever they followed this slow breathing pattern, blood flow to the brain increased, and the systems in the body entered a state of coherence, and nervous system coherence. When the functions of heart, circulation, and nervous system are coordinated to peak efficiency. All right. So the moment the subjects return to the spontaneous breathing or talking, their hearts would beat a little more erratically, and the integration of these systems would slowly fall apart. A few more slow and relaxed breaths, and it would return to that coherent state, right? And so, like I said, 5.5 second inhales followed by 5.5 second exhales, which works out to the 5.5 breaths per minute. And what was the other thing he said? Oh, this is from the people that did the study. We believe that the rosary may have partly evolved because it synchronized with the inherent cardiovascular rhythms and thus gave a feeling of well-being and perhaps an increased responsiveness to the religious message.
Right.
In other words, the meditations, Ave Maria, and dozens of other prayers that had been developed over the past several thousand years weren't all baseless. Prayer heals, especially when it's practiced at 5.5 breaths a minute.
The act of prayer.
And it's this. It's so crazy. I mean, I mean, we say it's crazy or it's wild or whatever, but it's like it's God.
It is.
I mean, it's God. It's you have all these different religions that developed their prayers, their mantras, their whatever, right? And it all works out to be the same. And when we can find ourselves in that rhythm, right? And I like what you said earlier. Again, you had this music going. Maybe in times of worship where I hear people say like, "Oh, well, we had this certain sound in worship," or whatever, and it's like, I know what they're talking about. They got to a point where there was this music playing, and there's not really any vocalization. There's no words. Maybe somebody's humming something or oohing and ahhing or something like that, right? But there's not any words being spoken, but they're finding themselves in this rhythm, and it literally becomes this healing moment, right? Physically and spiritually.
So even having this conversation with somebody else a while back about the Ave Maria, and I had no clue you were going to talk about any of that, and I probably have to refresh my memory, but it's the Mary, blessed art thou among women. You get the normal, that ain't in the Bible. Well, I beg your pardon, it absolutely is. It's in Luke chapter 1, and it's what Gabriel says to Mary. So yes, it is there, and it's asking it says at the end, remember us in our death. Remember us, because it's the thought behind the prayer itself is that she is the first one to say yes to God, or yes to Jesus.
Yes.
She's the first one to do so, and lives as an example to the rest of us to say yes to Jesus. And now, as we crucify, if you want to use religious language, we crucify that flesh. We crucify our no to God.
Yeah.
We remember Mary, who said yes.
Yep.
And how, knowing that she would suffer, knowing that she would feel loss, knowing that she would feel pain, still says yes.
Yep.
And so this 6-second prayer of saying, remember us in our pain.
Yeah.
Remember when we remember you in our pain. We remember you when we have to say yes. That there's, again, the act of the prayer.
Yes.
Maybe not necessarily even exactly what you're saying, but the act of the prayer.
Yeah.
That it's not just something that was started with the rosary with Catholics. It's like you say, it goes all the way back to Jainism, one of the oldest religions in the world.
Yeah.
This act of intermingling yourself or intertwining yourself is one of the words that we use a lot out of where, they that wait upon the Lord, they that intertwine themselves with the Lord, that mount up on wings of eagles. They have strength, they run, they don't grow weary. So it's intertwining ourselves with God in those moments of contemplation that only take about 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And how that can be something, just this act, something that's restorative and healing, much like what you said out of Acts chapter 3, where it's the times of restitution, which are healing, and times of recovery of breath to breathe again. Yep. And I'll say on Sunday, I've never have been more aware of my own breath or my breathing as I was during the sermon. That's the most of what I was thinking about. A lot of the time I'm sitting there and go, and then like Pastor, he came in here and he said, I'm going to breathe out of this, this nostril and this so I can be more creative. And so I've never been more aware of my breathing than I was that moment. But I'll be honest, when it led us to the end of the sermon, and our sermons, many of you know, about an hour long, hour and a half sometimes 2 hours, who knows? You never really know exactly what you're going to get sometimes, but you can at least count on an hour. But in that hour time of coming from playing the drums and being active and being kind of hyped up and sweating, because we played a pretty fast song at one point. And so being really kind of still amped up, heart still beating fast, and then walking to the back and coming in here trying to calm down and get my mind kind of settled, and you're already preaching, and get in here. But in that hour window of sitting there and being aware of my breathing and not really feeling any emotions at that point, not feeling, just like other than the, oh man, that's good. Oh, that's a good thought. All the things that you normally feel when one of us are preaching. And then by the time I get to the end of it, being aware of my breath, being aware of the prayer, being aware of this moment, that it led me to this emotional thing begins to happen. And it led everybody to prayer. Yeah. Everybody that was joined into the moment was led to prayer. Yeah. And they get to this place of feeling the presence, again, practicing that presence. Yeah. And it wasn't something that was it wasn't a long prayer. I sat there, I knelt there at the altar and prayed very shortly, and that's about all I felt. I didn't really feel this need to tarry in the Holy Ghost and speak in tongues all this time. Yeah. I felt even more connectedness to God. Wow. In just this short amount of time, because I think when you get down to it, if we're really presenting the gospel that we say that we're presenting at this church and on the stream and everything, then what we're really presenting is a gospel that says that God is with you everywhere. Yep. That it's not just a practicing the present situation in a worship service or a worship church environment. That's right. It's outside of church. It's outside of organized religion as a whole. Yeah. And when you talk about this rhythm and this sound that comes from thousands of years ago and seems to morph into different things, or at least is revealed in different locations across the world, you can't help but think Hebrews 1, how in times past, in diverse manners, God has revealed himself, but now he's revealing himself through his Son. Yes. Karl Barth, I was telling you earlier, I was going back through a couple of old things that I had read. Karl Barth had he was a theologian, I think he was a German theologian, and wrote some fantastic stuff specifically about Romans. That was one that I was reading. But he had this interaction where he was given a lecture, and he gets to the end of his lecture, and you get to the Q&A part, and this student stands up and says, how do you feel about God revealing himself to all these different religions and not just Christianity? And he says, and this is his response, and it's such a beautiful response, and it's so quotable too. It says, no, God has never revealed himself to a religion, not even Christianity. God reveals himself through his Son.
Wow.
And that's the way that you leave it. God did not reveal Jesus to institute Christianity. God did not reveal himself to the Jains to give a certain prayer, to the Hindus to give a certain. God is revealing himself through the work of Jesus Christ as his Son. Now, God has revealed himself in times past, the way Hebrews wrote it.
Yeah.
And he very adequately states it that way, that God has revealed himself in diverse manners, different places, different ways. But now, the way in which God will reveal himself is through the Son.
Yes.
It's through Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
This is the newest, most freshest way for God to reveal himself. And then none other than the one through whom God reveals himself.
Yeah.
Gets to John chapter 20.
Yeah.
Where he tells the disciples,
so good.
as the Father has sent me, so send I you.
Yeah.
Now, I've been dispatched, or the word is apostello. I'm the apostolic idea to the world.
Yep.
I am God's apostle to the earth, in the same way that God has made me an apostle of this idea, this grand idea of God being not far off, but God making his tabernacle here. That this thought of this union with God, and he talks about it in John 17, that I pray that you make them one as we're one, that they and us and they, all of this union that's going on, no separation, and how he gets to this place where he's saying, as the Father has sent me to show union, to show the oneness of God to creation, so send I you to show this same union of God to his creation. And then it says right after that, that's the moment that he breathes on them and says, receive the Holy Ghost. And this is after he's already crucified and he's already risen. This is the glorified Jesus. This is the one that we preach about. This is the fullness, the full package of the Son of God, revealing himself to his disciples who are dismayed and disheartened, who feel the loss, who feel the pain, feel that there's no hope for them, feel that everything is just dashed to pieces, and all these last 3.5 years that they've spent with this guy is over. Everything they've done is over. So he breathes on them and tells them to receive the Holy Ghost. But of course, we say in the Pentecostal and charismatic churches, that's not really when they did it. It was when they spoke in tongues. And maybe there's it's up for debate. You can have those debates. I'm not going to get into that with
splitting hairs.
Yeah, I'm not going to split frog hairs at that. That's so thin you can't even see. There's no point in those arguments or those debates, but I'm sure somebody will find a purpose to use for those. By all means, do so. I don't really care. But he gets into this point where he says, breathe on them and receive the Holy Ghost. But then the very next book that's written out of Acts, and he gives them the instruction. Go and tarry. Go pray. Go have these contemplative moments, these unitive moments in this upper room that could hold hundreds of people. Go into this upper room, and he said, this is the thing that's going to make you witnesses of me in Jerusalem, your hometown, Judea, the next town, Samaria, the town you don't want to go, and the uttermost parts of the world. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the world. John 20, as the Father sent me, so send I you. And it's through this breath of spirit that you seem to tap into, if you want to use that phrase. Like it's like, when they, I guess you see these commercials about how people do this in Canada for maple syrup, and it's like they just plug something into a tree and maple syrup just pours out of the tree, however that works. But it's like, you think of this faucet that's just tapped into the breath of God, and then tarrying there, thinking about it, or waiting in these moments, and you not speaking, but letting God speak, and how the Spirit begins to move and flow, and you get into what Jesus was talking about. You get into the Acts 1 before he ascends. Be witnesses of me. This Spirit and this power that will descend on you will make you witnesses, so send I you as Father sent me.
Yeah.
Make you witnesses in your hometown, in the place you're familiar with.
Yep.
In the place in Judea where you might not be as familiar, but it's the next place. It's the next closest place to where you could go. In Samaria, to the people to whom you believe you're not called.
Yep.
And to the people that you would say are not qualified.
Yeah.
To the people that you would say are outside of the covenant of God.
Yes.
So you're saying, Michael and Jesus, that the breath of God, that this this breath, the breath that God breathes into the nostrils, the face-to-faceness with God, as you would have to be face-to-face to breathe into someone's nostrils. I just thinking out loud on that. And I loved it when you did that too. This face-to-faceness with God as he breathes into our nostrils like babies.
Yes.
And you compared the CPR, we're giving a baby CPR, you breathe into its nose.
Yep.
So like dear children, he's breathing into our lungs the breath of life.
Yes.
And then says, this breath of life is going to ask you now.
Yep.
It's not going to force you, but it's going to invite you
Yeah.
to be a witness to the relationship of father and son. It's going to invite you to speak of God indwelling his creation.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to invite you to speak of God being like this New Jerusalem that's like a bride adorned for a husband and descends out of heaven for God. And then we hear with a loud voice.
Yep.
I love the way Revelation says that. It says, I heard a great voice say, the tabernacle of God is with men.
Yep.
That God has made a tent in the backyard of every man and woman's house. That God has made his dwelling place with mankind.
Yep.
And that's the loud voice that you hear.
Yes.
Not, oh, New Jerusalem, Square City, heaven, streets of gold, pearly gates. You don't hear those with a loud voice. You hear the loud voice say, God is living with mankind.
Yep.
And so this breath leads us to be, or at least ask us to be witnesses where we are, where we could be, and to those that are outside the gate, to those that say that they have been told, at least by religion, that they don't belong, that they're not a part of God, that they're not in the thought or the mind of God, and that God doesn't think about them until they say a sinner's prayer, that God is not aware of them until they pray our religious prayer or do our religious acts or whatever it is, that it's the invitation, again, to breathe, recover your breath as knowing you're a son of God, and then giving that breath to someone else.
Yeah, that's it. And it's going back to, Christ breathed on them, and I'm like you, whatever, did they receive it then? Did they receive it in Acts 2? It doesn't really matter. Yeah. At the end of the day, what matters is they found themselves in this place where now it's manifesting. Right?
Yes.
It's they're actually experiencing it. Like you said, it's an experience, right? Mm-hmm. And once we get into that flow, whether it's with 100 people or it's with 5 people or it's with one other person, when you get into that flow, and you can, that's why we can go to another country. We've both been to Africa. Plenty of folks been to.
We should have a Wednesday where we talk about that experience.
Yes. Our little mouse friend.
Mouse.
That kept us company. Oh my God. Or 3 or 4 of them. I don't know.
Who knows?
But as a whole family, I'm sure extended cousins. But you have this. That's why you can go literally on the other side of the world, not speak the local language, and still have that experience. That same type of experience that you have, whether it's in your church or in your prayer closet or driving down the road or wherever you have this experience, right, where the Spirit of God is literally manifesting. That's like you said, you're tapping into it. It is there, right? But it's actually literally being able to experience it, and that's where it becomes this this substantial thing that is happening, and I can actually. It's sort of tangible at that point, right? I can feel it. I feel it in my emotions. I feel it in my body and my physiology. I feel goosebumps and the hairs stand up on my neck and whatever else, right? And it's like, and tears flowing down my face. But I'm having this experience, and again, that's why we can go around the world, literally have that same experience like they did in the upper room, and somebody could be speaking in a different tongue, right? Like, I didn't know you spoke my language. Well, I actually don't. I don't know how this is happening. It's like, but that's what we're tapping into. Yeah. And that's also, like you said, that's the gift that God has given us to take to the rest of the world and to go and resuscitate, the creatures that are out there, these humans, these children that they've lost their way, right? They're totally unconscious. They're knocked out. They're still breathing, but they're unconscious. Yeah. And it's like we need to give them a blast of breath into their nostrils, right? And the nostrils represent strength. That's the strength of the person. Yeah. And when God breathes into Adam's nostrils, he exists, but also that's his place of strength. Yeah. That's where he receives that. We receive our strength from God. We don't receive it from something else or someone else, And perhaps God gives us that through the different relationships that we have. But regardless, our sustenance is of the Lord, right? But the experience that we're having, we are supposed to take to other people, right? We're supposed to take it to the world and breathe into them. And if you go to Ezekiel 37,
that's good.
I think it's verse 4 is where it starts. Yeah, it's verse 4. He says, and he said unto me, he said unto me, prophesy upon these bones, and say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. Now, I mean, if you think about that, it's like these are bones. Yeah. There's no flesh. No. There's no sinew. There's no tissue. There's no lungs. What are you talking about? There's going to be breath in these bones, right? It's like, what are we talking about here? And I will lay sinew upon you, and will bring up flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live, and you shall know that I am the Lord. And then, so it goes on, he prophesies to the bones, right? But that is kind of the task that we're called to, at least in my mind. Like, when I was studying all of this, I'm like, that's what people need. They need this times of refreshing, this fresh breath of air. It's, I forget the Greek word now. Anapsixis, or anapsixis, however you want to say it. Suxis, sorry, anapsuxis. So, and it properly, it means a recovery of breath. It's a refreshing coolness after heat. Yeah. Refreshing, recreation, rest. Man. So it's this, and another meaning is revival. Right, so literally to revive, not like when we have a camp meeting, not that kind of revival. But hey, that's good too, right? But I think that it's more than that, right? It's more than just kind of a jolt, that sustains us for a short period of time. But this is a time of refreshing, right? A breath that when breathed into us, it revives us totally, right?
Our idea of revival, at least the idea of revival that I had when I was a kid, was lightning bolts. And you said jolt. So I'm thinking revival, we're getting lightning bolts from heaven. It's going to, electrocute us. Here we go. Yeah. But it's what if we looked at revival a completely different way? Yes. What if we looked at revival as, hey, everybody just sit here and breathe in the presence of God, breathe in the Spirit of God. Yes. It might not look the same, And that's not exactly.
It won't look the same. It will look more like us tarrying with Christ as he prays. Yep. And that's one of the things that he asked us. I mean, you couldn't tarry with me for an hour. Yeah. And I think that's one of the troubles that we have, right? I mean, we find ourselves. I mean, I've had that experience where I've found myself impatient. Yeah. Preoccupied with other things, or hey, I'm just tired and I want to go to sleep. It's like, hey man, I'm like Peter, James, and John. Just. I'm over here snoozing, and it's like, hey, can't you just tarry with me an hour? Just be with me here in this moment. Yeah. Breathe with me in this moment as I breathe out my prayers to my Father in this time. And whether it's a time where you literally sit down and go through this prayer, because this is the other thing. I thought about this again the other day. Prayer is not for it's not for God. It's for you.
That's very good.
Prayer is not about moving God. It's about changing your heart.
Say that again for the people.
The people in the back. Yeah. Prayer is not about moving God. It's about changing your heart.
How many times have we done that to work ourselves up, work ourselves into a frenzy, thinking that our our energetic prayer is going to make God do this.
Yeah.
And I get it. The fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. I've heard that verse too.
Yes.
But I think that when we think of fervent prayer, it's a meaning of it. It's a prayer with a meaning.
Yes.
It's a prayer that is, like you said, not in order to get a gumball out of the cosmic gumball machine, or to get an answer. I put my 25-cent prayer, and I keep putting these 25-cent tokens in the machine, and I am not getting my gumball.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't know if my kids are like this. Yeah, you've experienced. We go to the restaurant, put the 25 cents in. I wanted the pink gumball. I got a white one.
Oh,
So,
no.
okay, well, you got the white one because I don't have any other quarters. Grammy doesn't have any other quarters either. So you're just going to have to eat that one. I wanted the pink one. And then, of course, oh, here's another quarter. So everybody starts try to appease, like, no, appease them. They're going to have to eat the white gumball.
That's right.
It is what it is, or whatever color they end up with. Yeah. But you think we work ourselves into a frenzy.
Yes.
We've sweated ourselves to death in prayer services and Holy Ghost services and revivals, thinking that that's what moves God.
Yeah, and it's like the prayer in the garden.
Yeah.
Christ prayed until his sweat became great drops of blood. He was literally bursting the capillaries underneath his skin. He's bleeding out in the garden over this prayer. Did God change his mind? No. Father didn't change his mind. No. This is what is. This is what has to be. Yeah. You have to endure this suffering. Yeah. There is no other way. That is his prayer. If there's another way, then let's let this cup pass on, right? Yeah. Let's move on to the next thing. That is not what happens. Yeah. And again, I think it's that, finding, whether it's finding solace in what is happening, all the suffering that's going on in your household, in your life directly. Maybe it's your body, maybe it's a physical ailment, whatever the case may be, but finding peace in that. Yeah. And I think that that's found in those moments of real, true, deep connection with the Father.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that is done through this, whether it's literal physical breathing or it's a spiritual breathing, right? It's this breathing deeply in the things of God and allowing that to have its work in me. It's like when so I didn't really talk about this on Sunday, I don't think, but there is a breathing technique called Tumo. And it was basically discovered by this Indian guy who kind of got bored of his domestic life, divorced his wife, packed a bag, and went into the mountains. Right. And he arrived at this Buddhist temple and this university, and he learned all of their ways and became very proficient in what they were teaching. And he eventually found himself out in this cave, and it's freezing cold, whatever, out in the mountains. And he started doing this deep breathing, this really, really deep breathing. And it was, it's kind of quicker breath, actually, but it's real deep. And he would do it for hours. And he got to the point where he perfected this breathing technique so much so that he could literally, from one hand to the other, he could change his skin temperature by 11 degrees. Or 17 degrees, whatever it was. But he could literally change the temperature in his left hand would be different than the temperature on his right hand. And so they studied him and all this stuff or whatever. Well, anyways, Tumo, it takes hours, right? It's hours and hours of breathing. The Tibetan monks, they do something similar to that, to Tumo, and they can literally be sitting in a icy or snowy tundra or whatever, and do this breathing technique, and they can sit there in virtually nothing but their underwear and melt circles of snow around them, right? And so
that's how I pray too. I get
yeah, exactly. So this guy came along, Wim Hof. I've talked about him before. Dutch man, and his technique he developed after his wife committed suicide. And he was very, very sad, very depressed, but he had 5 children to raise. Wow. And so he was like, I've got to figure out how to kind of get back to this, get back to some sense of normalcy. And so he goes, he's kind of crazy. If you go watch him and listen to him, he's sort of a nutcase. But anyways, he goes out to a park.
Sounds like he is, to be honest with you.
Yeah. He goes out to a park where him and his family would go often. But it was wintertime, and where they lived, it was very, very, very cold. And the lake or the pond or whatever out there at the park was frozen over with ice. Well, this dude cuts a hole in the ice and gets in the water.
Yeah.
And he's sort of reconnecting with nature and kind of has this thing or whatever. But anyways, in that, he said, I realized when I jumped into the water, my initial response was to take a deep breath, right? And he figured out that once he calmed his body down, that he could be in the cold water really as long as he wanted to. And so essentially what he did was he took Tumo and he sort of like packaged it into this, neater, quicker sort of access or whatever. So ultimately, he develops this breathing technique, and you take like 30 or 40 breaths at a time, and then on the last breath, you exhale out and you just hold it and you just wait. And in the process, you're doing the same thing that Tumo does. You're accessing the deeper parts of your physiology. Well, what they figured out with Tumo is that you are activating your limbic system, which sends your body into panic mode. And it happens when you're about to die, actually. And basically your body's on high alert, right? It's sending all the emergency signals or whatever, and it's saying, hey, something's wrong, we need to do something. But when you go into that voluntarily, right, when you experience this voluntarily, it has the complete opposite effect. So in other words, you're not dying now, your systems aren't shutting down, but you're actually in a mode of healing, recovery, restoration, balance. It literally will balance the pH in your body. You will go from being more acidic to being more alkaline if you do this breathing technique. And it's the same thing when it comes to these moments of prayer, just like what Christ experienced in the garden, right? Yeah, is your mic dead? His mic's dead. But so yeah, it's learning the obedience by the things that he's suffered. And so but we have these moments where, again, we're dealing with what we're dealing with, right? We're carrying the burdens that we're carrying. We're having these experiences or whatever, where things maybe are falling apart, or it feels like the world's coming to an end, or I'm dying literally. And like Brent's mic has died, but we have these moments, and it's like, if we can voluntarily go into it, and Josh has talked about this, I don't know how many times, just the voluntary confrontation of fear, the voluntary confrontation of the thing. It's in sales they call it eating the frog. Eat that frog, the one thing that you don't want to do, the call that you don't want to make, the client you don't want to talk to, the person you don't want to see, eat that frog. Like, that needs to be the thing that you do first in the day, so that you can go and get that out of the way and be done with it and be okay, right? But if we will voluntarily, hey, welcome back.
Hey.
If we will voluntarily go into these tougher moments, right, or these heavy moments, these places, and we will sort of breathe our way through it. And I'm saying breathe, but it's prayer. It's like Nestor said. Another word for slow breathing, it's prayer. Yeah. Slow breathing is prayer, and it's healing. It's especially healing if you do it in 5.5 breaths per minute, right? But anyways, it's restorative. It does everything that we want prayer to do, if we do it the right way. Yeah. But like you said, when we're throwing these 25-cent prayers at God and expecting some cosmic gumball, we expect God to, we expect to be able to walk down the street and pick up a lottery ticket that someone happened to purchase that fell out of their pocket or whatever.
That way we didn't have to purchase it, so that we
exactly. Yeah, we didn't buy it. Or I didn't spend my money on that devil stuff. Or like, come on, man. But that's what we want. That's what we want to happen.
Well, I bought a $1 billion ticket.
Yeah, hey.
I'll tell you that right now. I'm no better person to win it than me is what I think. So
that's exactly right.
I think that's what God thinks too.
Yeah.
Just kidding. So when you approach prayer, though, if you approach it with the motive, like what I just did, like when you approach it with a prayer like, God, please let me win that $1 billion Powerball, or it's, God, get me out of this. I just made a huge mess for myself. I got arrested last night and whatever else. And if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again. Or you name it. When you approach God with that motive for prayer,
Yep.
you're going to be grossly disappointed. I'll just let you know, you're going to be grossly disappointed. Yes. You're not going to get the thing that you're expecting to get, because that is not like you said, it's not the purpose for prayer.
Right.
The purpose for prayer, it changes you.
Yeah.
Now, sure, if that prayer that you're praying says, God, all right, I got arrested last night. If you get me out of this, I'll never do it again. If that really does change you, good for you.
Yes.
Great. That it changed you. You're never going to do that again. That's awesome. But it's not God that got you out of your problem that changed you. It's you being changed. You're making a commitment to do something different. Yeah. Or it changes you in that you realize that this suffering that I'm trying to avoid is the very thing that I'm going to have to walk into.
Yep.
It's the cold shower that I'm going to have to step up and take. It's the suffering that I'm going to have to endure, the same way that Jesus learned obedience by the things he suffered. Yep. Yet he was a son. Even though he was a son, he became a servant. Mm-hmm. He lived the idea or the thought of being a servant, even though he didn't necessarily have to, but he chose to, and teaches us that we're not servants of God. That's what he says to his disciples. You're not a servant to me. I've not called you servants. I've called you friends. And then you take what Paul said in Galatians. You're no longer servants. You never were called servants. You've always been called sons. Yep. So I'm never a servant to God. I'm not a slave to God. I'm a slave to my brother. I'm a slave to mankind. I'm a servant to you, because that's what Jesus says. The greatest among you will be the least among you will be the greatest. And I'm asking you to be servants.
Yes.
So it leads you to this voluntary suffering, a voluntary servitude, not to God, but to mankind.
To mankind,
because the motive has changed.
Yeah, and that's that going to those people, like you said, whether it's your immediate circles, or it's the folks that are just outside those circles, or it's the folks that you think are disqualified or too far away or disconnected from God, whatever. But it's going to those people with the purpose of providing them that fresh breath, providing them that recovery of breath, or the times of refreshing that we see in Acts 3.
Right.
And help, bringing them into that experience that you're having, right? Bringing them into the upper room of your life, right? Where they can start to connect with you on that breath level. They can start to connect with you on that heart beating level. They can start to connect with you on that mind level, right? Because it's like I said Sunday, when you're in that corporal worship, when you're singing those songs, or you're chanting those chants and prayers, if you look at these, I went to the Buddhist temple. There's one down here in South Carolina, and I went there for it was actually for school. I had to write a paper, basically about an experience with another religion, and it's multicultural competencies, that kind of thing, But so I went there, and the day that I went, they were setting up for some kind of festival or something that they were having, I think, that weekend. And anyways, there was a group of men in the temple when I got there, and they were praying. And they had this one guy who was reading from this book, right, just sort of reading through this mantra, and he would hit this little gong every now and then. And he was saying it over the like speaker or whatever, and then the other people were joining in on certain parts. There were certain things or whatever that they were doing, but they're having this moment, and it's like I said Sunday, that you have to imagine that they're in that upper room, that they had to be doing something similar to that, right? They got themselves into one mind and one accord, and that's what these men are doing at this temple or whatever. Right. But that's the sort of thing that we should be able to draw people into, right? You should be able to draw people into that experience that you have with God, whether it's in times of worship or it's times of prayer, and bring them into that experience so that they can experience the restorative, healing, reviving power of the breath of God. That's what happened and Pastor pointed it out, I think that was Sunday night, I think he said something about it, but on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 souls are added to the church. And it's the redemption of what happened at Mount Sinai. 3,000 people are killed after the Baal worship, right? But because of the Spirit of God and this activation, right, of the breath of God in these people, there are 3,000 souls that are revived, or who God breathes the breath into these dry bones, right? And they're brought into the kingdom of God.
And the law and priests or the Levites are slaying them.
Yes.
We're not doing that anymore.
That's exactly right.
We've got breath that's going to bring.
Yep.
That's good.
The letter killeth. It's like like you said, the words. Sometimes there's too many words. Yeah. There's just too much. There's too much swirling around, even if there is music playing, right? There might be, and it might be a great song. You may even love that song, but I've found myself in that place before where it's like, man, I really just don't want to hear anybody talking right now. But I also kind of want to hear that music, right? Yeah. I mean, because it's like you need a soundtrack almost to what's going on or something. But you need to.
I don't want to hear people talking for other reasons sometimes.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure.
That's another
topic. But it's like to kind of get the noise out, right? Even though there's music playing, it's getting rid of all the noise, and it's like all those words can just jumble things up and clog things up, so to speak, and cause. It's just like the breathing. I mean, when you're talking, you're breathing erratically. When you're speaking, whether it's you're in a conversation or you're up talking to folks in a presentation or something like that, you're breathing erratically. When you're singing a song or you're just listening to music, right, you're actually breathing in that rhythm. Yeah. And it could be fast or slow, whatever, but you're breathing in a rhythm. There's purpose, there's dynamic to your breath, and it's not erratic, it's not all over the place, which means that your heart's calming down, your brain's calming down, and all those systems are starting to become coherent and integrated. Yep. And that's where you can have those moments of clarity. And there are times where people have, I talked about Wim Hof's breathing method, and same with Timu, but people will practice this breath work, and they will literally feel like they've been taken out of their body. They're having like an out-of-body experience. Yeah. It's almost like a psychedelic experience. Right. And even just doing it in small amounts, you can feel like almost like you're getting high. Yeah. And I know that sounds weird, but it's like, and Wim Hof calls it getting high on your own supply. Well, and it's literally you're almost high on the oxygen, but it's this, you can feel it in your body, you can feel it working, and it's the same thing, spiritually speaking. And I think about like I said, the purpose of this breath. Like, what is the purpose of us receiving this breath besides just existing, right? Right. Because there is a purpose for our existence, and I read it out of Isaiah on Sunday, but Jesus said this in Luke 4, verse 18. He's quoting Isaiah, and he says, "The Spirit of the Lord," and the word in the Old Testament and the New Testament is breath. Yeah, that's right. And he says, "The pneuma, the Spirit of the Lord, is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." The reason that we're given that breath is to do those things. Preach the gospel to the poor. Preach the good news to the poor. Heal the brokenhearted. Preach deliverance to the captives. Recover sight to the blind. Set at liberty those that are bruised, those that are hurt, those that are broken. To preach the acceptable year of the Lord. That's why we've been given this breath. That should be our purpose every time we go out. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? Kevin told me this, and it's not been that long ago. He's like, no matter what you're doing, the ultimate goal is this. Yeah. It's the gospel. It is. Regardless of all the other stuff that you do, regardless of all the other things that are going on in your life, whether it's work or it's baseball games or it's whatever, all that stuff's great. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But it's the gospel. Yeah. That's what we're going for. And that breath, and look, it starts, like you said, locally. It starts in your own family. Yeah. It starts with your kids, right? I mean, teaching them to receive this breath, receive this life from God, and hopefully give that to, their friends and whatever, classmates and whoever else.
And receiving it as effortlessly as breathing.
Man.
Because breathing is it's one of the most effortless things that you can do. Yes. And it's as simple as it gets of just inhaling and exhaling. I wanted to ask you this, and I don't know how much more you have left, but I at least wanted to ask you this point, at least towards as we as I ran out of things. This was the last thing that I wanted to bring up. As there are, I know that we talk a lot about, especially or specifically, the way that you went with it Sunday, of God breathing into the nostrils of Adam, so like father to son, and how that relates. And that's a theme that's throughout the Old Testament and the New, specifically in the person of Jesus, as he's talking about his oneness with the Father, and how that's a theme throughout the whole Bible, for one, of God or Jesus's oneness with God as Father, our oneness with God as Father. Yeah. But a theme that's also in there that we don't talk a whole lot about sometimes, and probably does need mentioning even more. It gets weird for folks because I think there are people that take it and make it weird. So I'm okay with getting a little weird with it. But the intimacy of Jesus to his bride. Because not everybody has the great experience of a great normal biological father. Yeah. So when they approach God, they don't always approach God as a great dad. Yep. And some people don't have that. They don't have that type of love relationship. So it takes a lot more effort and a lot more learning or unlearning one relationship to learn anew. But I think one of the easiest ways to receive an entrance to that breath is the way that Jesus interacts with his bride. Yeah. And it's quoted by Paul. It says that the church is his bride. Yeah. And well, what's the church then? Well, it's ecclesia. It's called out. So you've been called out from, well, we say the world. You've been called out from the world. Well, what would be the world then? So it's the orderly systems of mankind, being called out from anything that, and again, that type of relationship of having a negative relationship that plays into how you interact with God. It's God saying, let me call you from that. Let me call you away. And we talked about this a bit with Teresa when she talked about Song of Solomon beautifully, about how come away with me, my lovely one, and let's have this relationship all over. And takes her to the top of Mount Amana. It's the mountain of amen. Take her to the top of the mountain of saying yes, of agreeing, and now you say the same thing that I say. And the reason I bring this up is I was reading earlier this week, and it just kind of hit me a little while ago about this certain portion to add into that question. And so I'm kind of glad I read it now, but it's C. Baxter Kruger, great, I mean, academic, academy, what am I saying? Academy recognized scholar, and just a good old Mississippi boy. Oh yeah. So, which his voice is just like, it's like Luke Bryan. You can hear both of them. You could have Luke Bryan. I don't like his songs, but I could listen to Luke Bryan and C. Baxter Kruger read anything. They could read Green Eggs and Ham, and it's just their voice is just
Matthew McConaughey.
But Matthew McConaughey has got this voice of butter that you just want to listen to. Yep. So anyway, I was reading one of his papers, or reading through one of his papers. I didn't get to finish part of it, but he was talking about, and he was using reference from John 1 and talking about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, but how it's quoted in King James and how he feels that it should be translated this way. And the reason he goes into that is where it says that he came to his own, and his own people did not accept him, and how it's almost like they didn't recognize him. So it's almost as if Christ sees the delusion of mankind, or the future husband sees the delusion of his future bride, and enters in. So instead of saying, and the Word became flesh, it should say, and according to him, he said, it should say, so the Word became flesh. Because of the delusion of the flesh, the Word became the flesh. It became the delusion to show us that there is no delusion. So the idea then being not just father to son breath, face-to-face breath, but husband to wife, bride to groom, face-to-faceness, and intimacy, and now an exchange of breath that way. An exchange of breath by becoming the delusion and entering into it. And you talked about this a little bit ago, about how, especially when you went to Luke 4, where what a mission statement. If we scratch every mission statement of every church in the world and put that out there and say, well, what if we focused on this and less about everything else? But that's it's just as beautifully stated. So to enter into the delusion with mankind and give them breath. When we have these, I'm keeping myself calm now, so I'm taking a deep breath.
Good.
When we have these moments of worship, and like you're saying, maybe where there's not a lot of words, but there's intimacy, and there's known intimacy in this moment or in an exchange, and feeling the Spirit that way. When we live that closeness with God, and not to say that we earned that closeness, but where He comes near to us as a bride.
Yeah.
How do we, and maybe you have an answer to this, maybe you don't. Maybe I'm asking a stupid question.
No.
How do you feel that we should explain that type of closeness, or at least lead people to that willingness to have, to be brought close like a bride? As macho and as big, as strong as we are, and we don't want to cry, we don't want to be intimate, we don't want to do that. But even helping people recognize your intimacy with your spouse is exactly what how Jesus relates to the church, and how Jesus relates to you. How or what would you think would be an easy way to? I don't know if there's an easy way to do that. If there's an easy or a streamlined way of getting people to see that intimacy, and understand it.
So I think that, I'm like you, people get weird with it, right?
Oh yeah.
They make it weird just to be weird, I think, sometimes. But it is very clear through the scriptures. I think of Gomer and Hosea.
Yeah.
So Gomer is living in the delusion, like you said. She's living in the delusion of having to sell herself, to these men or whatever, for whatever reason, whether it's to financially provide, or it's this is just who I am, this is just what I am, right? And God sends Hosea into her delusion to rescue her out of her delusion. And he has to do it multiple times, even after she has children, and they're sharing a family and all this stuff, right? But there is this requirement from Hosea to continually go after her, right? And Christ is doing the same thing. He's continually coming after us. And I think about it like this, and this is kind of silly, but men most of the time are the instigator when it comes to intimacy, right? Just because generally speaking, men are more active, right? That's not to say that women aren't, but they're usually the ones that are going to
have higher sexual appetites.
Exactly, and that's it. And it's more, I think, in more terms of like the actual act of it, right? Like, so women like intimacy,
correct,
right? But it may be different for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so intimacy doesn't have to be intercourse.
Right.
It can be as simple as sitting together, having a deep conversation. Yeah. It can be as simple as sitting on the couch, holding hands, watching your favorite movie, or her favorite movie, maybe, right? Or both of your favorite movies. But regardless, that
be surprised how much you'd like certain movies.
Yeah.
We kind of like the same movies.
That's the truth of it. Or television shows or whatever. Like, yeah. So, but you again, it doesn't necessarily have to be intercourse. Now, I will say this about intercourse: when it comes to that literal physical act, you are finding yourself in a rhythm. Okay, there is a rhythm to it. It's sort of a dance. That's what intercourse is. It's sort of a dance, and some people haven't perfected that, right? And some people within their marriage, maybe there's not been enough of that. Positive, sort of no shame, no guilt, no nothing. I know that, just speaking from experience, when I got married, because there was so much stigma on sex when I was brought up as a teenager, as a child, as a teenager, young adult, whatever. As I progressed through those years, within church, right? And I found that this is more of a Southern thing, because when I've talked to other people, they're from different parts of the country or even different parts of the world, they don't have this problem as much.
Yeah.
There's not as much of a stigma tied
to forced
it.
modesty in the bedroom, which that's kind of That's difficult.
It's
Modesty.
right, exactly.
Wait a minute, that
So
doesn't make sense.
and you think about, let's go back to Adam and Eve, right?
Mhm.
When they were there naked in the garden,
Yeah.
right? When they were naked in the beginning with one another, they were completely transparent, completely honest with each other, completely upfront with each other. It's the same thing within your marriage, whether that's figuratively or literally,
Yeah.
right? There's this reality that we've got to be willing to be completely and totally vulnerable with
That's right.
one another,
That's
right?
right.
And that's the beginning of where we're at with God. We have to be willing
Yes.
to divest ourselves of whatever coverings we've got, right?
Yep.
Completely
expose
ourselves,
Yeah.
to God. Now, the Scripture makes it clear that He sees us already,
Yes.
right? He sees us naked from the beginning, right? It's inevitable. He's going to see right through those things, just like He did with Adam. And He
Right.
says, "Look, that's not even good enough to cover you.
That's right.
I need to provide that. I need to be your covering," right? It's like the man and the woman, and the hair and the whatever.
Yeah.
But regardless, you have this this openness, this honesty that's in the beginning, that's in the garden. So they're naked. Well, for me, coming up, there was this, like I said, stigma tied to sex and all that stuff, and the same thing for my wife. Like she heard the same things I did, right? And so it was sort of awkward when we got married. Even though, I mean, we got pregnant before we got married, but regardless, it was still sort of awkward.
Yeah.
There was this awkwardness that was tied to it, right? And it felt sort of out of sync or out of rhythm or whatever. But I remember specifically, and I'm obviously not going to give any details, but our wedding night was thanks. Our wedding night was completely different.
Yeah.
And there was this synchronicity. There was this oneness that and she would tell you the same thing, that we had neither one of us experienced up to this point.
Yeah.
And it was like, the union with God, the union with one another had brought us to this place of feeling this intimacy and connection that we had never felt before, even though we had physically been intimate.
Right.
And so going to, again, this rhythm, right? When you're in the act of it, there's literally a rhythm that is happening. Again, it's like a dance. And you actually, your breath begins to sync.
Yep.
Your heartbeats begin to sync, right? And you're in this moment, and now you're totally connected in that moment. And I've heard Dr. Leaf talk about this before too, when she talks about intimacy, with your partner, with your husband, your wife, that after it's over, right? After the act is done, whatever, to spend time in that moment as well. Don't rush away, right? But stay there with one another so that you can sort of instantiate that intimacy,
Feel
right?
Closeness.
That closeness, that oneness.
Yeah.
And so going back to kind of the Gomer example, right? She continually runs away. She's escaping out of this relationship because she doesn't feel worthy, because it's awkward, because maybe there's stigma tied to whatever it is for her. She feels exposed, maybe in some ways, in ways that she's never felt exposed before.
Right.
Because when we're in control of it, and that's one thing when it comes to intimacy, it's more dependent on your partner, right? It's not just you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, because the purpose of intimacy within a marriage, whether it's intercourse or just deep times together, again, those intimate moments, no matter what it is, it can't just be about you.
Correct.
It can't be about you achieving your pleasure, or you talking about the things that you want to talk about and not what they want to talk about, and so on and so forth, right? So it becomes this dance.
Right.
But I think that it's the same with God. And I think that if we're going to enter into those places of intimacy, whether you view it as the relationship with the Father and the Son, right? And you can have that view of things. Hopefully you do get that experience with God. But if you don't, and the next closest experience you have is your spouse, then the beginning place is to be completely naked, to be completely exposed, to be completely stripped down, all your preconceived notions, all your ideas, all your thoughts, all your plans, whatever, completely strip those things away.
Yeah.
All your mechanisms, the things that you use to hide and so on and so forth, all those things stripped away.
Yeah.
And you stay there or sit there or, go there in complete honesty with God. And then once you're in that place and you feel like, okay, I've stripped all this away, now it's time to start with the rhythm, right? And it begins softly. It begins slowly. Maybe it is through a little bit of prayer. Maybe it is through some worship music or songs or something like that. If you play an instrument, maybe you just start playing music. Don't say anything. Yeah. And then once that rhythm is established, then just get totally immersed in it. Get totally lost in that. Let your emotions go. Let your feelings go. Whatever it may be. I've never personally experienced this, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who has made love to the point that they were started crying or whatever. But my point is, you find yourself totally immersed in that moment, right? And then once you feel like that moment has faded away or is gone, right? Yeah. Then stay there. Yeah. Stay in that moment. Just linger there a little longer. Mm-hmm. Stay with the feeling. Stay with the intimacy for just as long as you can. Yeah. And maybe it's, will you tarry with me for an hour? Yeah. Maybe it's 3 hours, right? Maybe you end up like Brennan Manning, who on his way out, now you don't talk about somebody running away, right? He was pulling a Gomer. He was going to straight run away. Like, man, this is not for me. I'm not going to be a priest. There's no way I can't do this, et cetera, et cetera. And his bishop asked him to go to the temple and pray, or go to the temple and pray before he left. He said, go, do me a favor. He already had his bags packed, standing there at his door. And he says, do me a favor, go pray before you leave. And he goes into the I want to say temple. That's not the word I'm looking for. But anyways, he goes into the sanctuary or whatever, and he kneels down and starts to pray. Yeah. And he said, I got up 4 hours later, 3 hours later. Oh, my God. And he's totally lost in that moment. And of course, from there, he becomes a Franciscan priest. But and I'm not saying that a moment of intimacy with God is going to lead you to be a priest, but but hey, maybe it will. But
might not take you 4 hours either.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe it is. Maybe it's 30 minutes. Maybe it's an hour. Maybe it's 4 hours. Whatever the case may be. But go into that. Let yourself be fully immersed, and then linger there. Yeah. It's like if you go swimming at the pool, you don't. Most of the time, you don't immediately get out of the water and go walk into the house, right? Yeah. You're gonna hang out by the pool. You're gonna dry out. You're gonna sit in the sun or whatever. Bask in that. Contemplate what just happened. What are the things that I've discovered in this moment, or what are the things that God brought to my mind, brought to the surface? A great practice is journaling. That's good. Yeah. If you have a moment like that, whether it's prayer or worship, when you have those intimate moments, a really great practice is to write down what your experience was. Yeah. And when you can do that, then you begin to learn or kind of recognize the signals over and over, right? It's just like in a marriage. Right. You recognize the signal from your partner that, they want intimacy right now. Whatever that is. Yeah. Whatever that looks like for you guys. But hey, they want to be intimate right now. And you start to pick up on those signals from God. Yeah. I'm calling you out. I'm calling you forward. I'm calling you to come out from among them or whatever, right? Get yourself out of the noise, out of the voices, out of the crowds. And that can be inside your own mind, right? That's right. But drawing you out of that, and like I said, once you learn those signals, then you can go there much more easily, right? Yeah. And once those pathways are formed in your brain, because that literally happens, your mind changes your brain. Yeah. But when those pathways are formed in your brain, they're there forever. Yeah, they are. And the other thing is, if maybe you haven't had those moments of intimacy in a while, or it's been like, well, I just don't feel it anymore, or I haven't felt like that since I was a kid, those pathways are still there. They're just overgrown. Right now, all you need is to go with God and say, hey, help me identify that path, and then start cutting back the weeds. And you'll find yourself, back in that place of intimacy. But I think that's kind of, some first steps. Yeah. If, again, the more you do it, the more you practice it, the more you recognize those signals, and you can go there over and over and over. Yeah.
Anytime. In worship or on your own.
That's it.
That's good.
That's it.
Well, I've had you for about an hour now.
Yeah.
Or a little over that.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I'm good. Man.
Covered it all?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, man.
We pray for our friends out there at our buddy Josh Wood is preaching tonight. So glad that hopefully he had a great service.
Yes.
And then some other folks that have made their way back around that attended here when they were kids and coming back and wanting to give a dedication of their life to God. And so we're just really grateful for everybody that's been following, really grateful for everyone. Let's see, we've got a comment up there from Marty. Let's see here. First time watching. That's awesome. Thank you, Marty. We really appreciate you joining in with us and leaving us comments and everything. That's great. We'll have to definitely connect with you. That's awesome. This is wonderful. It's a wonderful night. Obviously, thankful for everybody that joins in with us online, liking, subscribing, and sharing. And I got an email today from Subsplash that our app is finished. It will be ready to go into they will be putting it into the iTunes, Google Play Store, anywhere. Should be in there by this weekend, possibly.
Awesome.
So once we get confirmation on that, we'll be rolling that out. We've got a link that we'll be able to post in Facebook, on the website, literally anywhere that'll take you so that you can give online if that's how you choose to do it, or if you just want to support what we're doing, if you really believe in this message of being in union with God and you want others to feel that connectedness and that intimacy with the Lord, knowing that they've been called out from any other bad religious idea that would tell them that they're disconnected or the delusion of separation, then we would just ask you to give so that we can keep pushing this message out to everybody that we can. Yeah. So,
good.
You good?
Yeah, man.
Well, I love him.
I love him.
Because he first
loved
me. Thank you very much. God bless you.
God bless you.